Greetings and salutations, real estate undergrounders. It is Ed Matthews with the Real Estate Underground. Thank you so much for joining us today. So today we have Andrew Freed. He is with Freedom Management. And actually we had his partner, Zach, on the show probably about 6-8 months ago. And it was a great conversation. So Andrew, I've been really excited about meeting you as well. And as a fellow New Englander, I'm down here in Connecticut. Welcome to the show. And thank you for your time today.
I am absolutely excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So for those of you who don't follow the beard on Instagram, although you should, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you and what you do?
So who am I and what I do? So it all goes back to when I was a child. I was conditioned to believe that the path to the American dream was getting a good education, getting a master's at a good school, getting a nice swanky condo in a nice city, working at a prestigious institution. And that's what I saw throughout my entire 20s. I always saw get a better education. I always thought the next high paying job. And I essentially achieved this at 30. I had a 6-figure job. I worked at a prestigious institution, the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, where I was a grant manager over there. And I had a nice swanky condo in Boston. I essentially made it. But after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad during COVID, I came to the realization that I actually didn't make it at this particular rate. I'm going to have to retire 30, 40, 50 years at this savings rate. And in Rich Dad Poor Dad, they had all these hints about real estate. And I was like, oh, what is this real estate thing? And then at that point, I looked at my net worth, which is about $250,000. 80% of my net worth derived from this 1-bedroom condo I bought 5 years ago. It literally took me 10 years to save $50,000. Right. And at that rate, I knew financial freedom through the quote unquote American dream was absolutely unsustainable and not achievable. And I really had to make a shift. So from that point on, during COVID, I HELOC'd my 1-bedroom condo for $200,000 in Boston. And I decided to start house hacking. My original goal was to house hack 10 multifamilies in 10 years, have 30 units right off into the wind. That's not how it turned out, but that's what was my dream. So I HELOC'd, I had $200,000 HELOC, and I decided I want to go all in the multifamily. And there were really 2 big markets in my area that had a lot of multifamily. There was Worcester, Massachusetts, and Brockton, Massachusetts. And to put it in perspective, Brockton produces the highest level of champion boxers, right? So it's a little rough.
Ray Mancini.
Yep, exactly. So I actually decided to go out in Worcester, where I literally uprooted my entire life. I knew nobody, and I started house hacking properties in Worcester. So I house hacked about 2 properties there. I did some joint ventures on some commercial properties, split it 50-50, a third with some investors, with some partners. And then I made it up to around 30 units with my own money through lines of credit, through borrowing against my 401k, through promissory notes. And I was straight out of cash, but I had all these amazing deals coming to me. And at that point, that's when I discovered the power of OPM, other people's money. And from there, I went from 30 units to 300 units in a matter of 4 years. So currently I'm a value add investor. I own about 300 multifamily units around the Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and South Carolina markets. Syndicator, flipper, and I'm an investor focused agent. Yeah, that's more or less kind of my story in a nutshell.
Okay. So you're busy.
I am busy.
Yeah, good. It's better to be busy than bored, right? So you didn't want to have to box to acquire properties, manage properties, and ultimately operate them, huh?
What was that? Sorry?
You don't want to have to box your way through your real estate journey. So you went to Worcester instead of Brockton, or did in Brockton.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I went to Worcester because Worcester has so many great market fundamentals. Like, first of all, like 30 to 40% of the housing stock is multifamily. Like, it's way easier to find a deal if there's a lot of that deal in that particular market. Additionally, it had really great population growth. From 2015 to now, the population increased by 50%. And they actually have the Red Sox minor league team called the Woo Sox Stadium, built the second most expensive stadium in that city. And they moved the team there. So it has a lot of great market fundamentals that I just personally didn't see that Brockton had.
Yeah, you took my talk at Red Sox. I missed them. And also, Worcester's a pretty good college town, too. There's probably, a dozen universities and colleges in the area?
So Worcester is normally on the Redfin top market list all the time. And to your point, there's a lot of schools. There's a lot of hospitals, right? There's actually biotech jobs. It's very similar to Boston. Like, it's Boston, just at a very smaller scale. Boston has about, 800,000 citizens. Worcester has about 250,000 citizens. But It's very similar to the Boston market, I would compare it to for sure.
Excellent. Excellent. And so, although from an MSA perspective, it doesn't necessarily follow Boston directly, there's enough geographical space there, right? And so like a 2-bedroom in Worcester is different than a 2-bedroom in Boston. Yeah.
You're exactly correct. So as Boston is definitely a low cap rate market, probably a 3-4 cap rate, right? And the more west you go from Boston, the more the cap rate expands, right? The more the cap rate expands equals more cash flow. When a cap rate constricts, that means that there's more appreciation. So it's on a spectrum, right?
Right.
And in Worcester, the cap rate around there is around 6.5% to 8%. And rents, to your point, are significantly cheaper, but you can get the units way cheaper as well, right? For comparison, 1 bed's in Worcester, $1,400. 1 bed's in Boston, $2,000, right? $2,200, right? So that kind of gives you a good indication of like the difference, but also with that comes cheaper units.
And so what was that aha moment when you realized it seemed like sounded in your story, it was more of a process, but I'm just curious, what was that one moment where you're like, I'm not going to get where I want to go working for someone else. I've got to branch out on my own. And obviously real estate is that vehicle, right?
So it all stemmed from regret, right? It all stemmed from the fact that I always thought I'd get this next paying job. I'd make more money. I'd get 6 figures. I would get this feeling of fulfillment. It never happened. And at a certain point, I just decided rather than seek the life I want to live, let me just escape in the video games and create the life I wanted to live in this 3D box. So that's exactly what I did is I escaped very much in the video games and spent a lot of my 20s playing video games. And the aha moment was when I realized that like life is a video game. If I put enough skill and effort into a certain task, like I can achieve anything I want. So taking that sort of discipline and that mentality from a video game and putting it in my real life. And the thing I really poured myself into was real estate knowledge, reading books, listening to podcasts, starting a real estate meetup, becoming an investor focused agent, getting a mentor. These are all steps that I took to enhance that skill. And now today, like my knowledge in regards to real estate is probably top 1% because I put the time and effort into growing that skill, just like you do in a video game.
Yeah. The law of 10,000 hours, it doesn't have to be 10,000 hours, but the law of 10,000 hours is a real thing, right? If you focus on one thing and learn everything you possibly can about that certain thing, you're going to suck at it at first, but over the course of months and years, you're going to become an expert, right? Exactly. Yeah. So walk me through, your growth was really fast, right? Going from 0 to 30 is a big jump. And then 30 to 300 is a gigantic jump. So I'm curious about how you did that from a systems perspective.
Totally. Really good question. It all came down to trust, right? When I first started building my real estate portfolio, it all came down to me being a one-man army. I did the bookkeeping. I did the leasing. I did literally everything from A to Z, right? And I scaled, but I scaled very slowly. And then I discovered the power of partnerships. Well, I found the ability that I could find somebody who was a superstar in some task I hated to do, and I was a superstar in some tasks they hated to do, and we combined forces. And when I did that, the exponential growth was visible. It was very visible. And I went from 10 to 30 units very quickly. And then at that point, after you learn how to use partnerships, that's when I really discovered the power of utilizing other people's money. And that's when my path zoomed up. So that was the progression of how this exponential growth happened. From a systems perspective, the way I really create systems, the way I really create teams is I ask myself, what takes the most energy from me every single day, right? And I slowly, systematically work down that list and either eliminate, create a system, create a process, or hire to take that responsibility off of my plate. So first started with social media, right? Bookkeeping, managing my email, right? Then it expanded to hiring property managers to take tenant communications. It expanded to getting a project manager on our team to help with renovations. It expanded to get an operations manager to help us with all of our multiple systems like AppFolio, like Smartsheet for project management, like Google Drive for managing our documentation. So it was a cascading effect that all started with principles in a book I like to call Buy Back Your Time that really shines a light on how to really systematize your time and more or less buy it back. That was my ultimate goal, is buy back my time. Because to your point, like growing that level of of a portfolio all by myself was absolutely unsustainable, and I would have completely burned out.
Yeah. And you require sleep, right? And a light.
Yes. Yes, I hope.
Yeah. So walk me through the Buy Back Your Life. I'm not actually familiar with that book. Do you remember the author? I'm going to
Buy back your time. I think I have it right over
Buy
here.
Back Your Time.
Dan Martell.
Oh, I know Dan Martell. I had not read that book. All right. Well, that's on the list now.
Because he walks you through systematically. You first start with an admin assistant, and then you work your way down through these different roles. And then when you go through all the roles at the end of it, you're very much probably going to be working 2 to 3 hours a day. So it's a really good roadmap on how to buy back your time. And at the end of the day, like, why do we get into real estate? People say all the time, I want financial freedom. That's not why you get into real estate. You want your time. You want your time, right? And this book creates a roadmap on how to give you that time back.
Oh, I love it. That is definitely on my list next. All right, so as you're building these systems, as you're hiring your team, so I heard you say admin assistant was one of the first people you hired. A bookkeeper, I assume, is one of the next people you hired. So what does your team look like today?
So my team really looks like this. We got an operations manager on top. She helps manage all of our systems, right? Our Appfolio for rent collection, for tenant management.
Yep.
Smartsheet for project management. We very much use it as a dashboard for our company for quick links for people to get their job done. We use Google Drive to manage the documentation. She helps with that process, and she helps create new systems that we need. And then from her, we have a bookkeeper that rolls down from her. And then on the maintenance side, we have 2 property managers that help manage the portfolio, take tenant inquiries, get units listed. We have a listing agent, a leasing agent as well. And then we have 2 maintenance techs that help manage and stabilize our portfolio. And then underneath that layer, that's where we have our virtual assistants. So we have our administrative assistant, virtual assistant. We have our social media virtual assistant, which is absolutely needed if you're trying to build real estate. You have to create a brand. It's number one priority for sure. We have a bookkeeper virtual assistant, and then we have a tenant communications virtual assistant. We also just hired a controller in Columbia, which is really cool. We hired this guy. Listen to this. We hired this guy, economics degree from Purdue, MBA from Washington University, but virtual assistant. He actually moved back to Columbia. So we got him through our virtual assistant agency, and we're only paying him like $3,500 a month. And
wow.
He's level person, right?
Right.
And then we also have an administrative assistant. But I think the common thread throughout building my team is keeping overhead low. So literally half of my team are virtual assistants, right? My operations managers in Ireland, right? My C-suite controllers in Colombia. All of my VAs are in the Philippines, right? And I told you about those maintenance techs, right? All their time is billed back to the LLC when they do work at that particular property. So if you build a team, you build it smart, and you figure out ways to keep your overhead low, that's really how you build a successful business, in my opinion.
Couldn't agree more. So I'm interested in the controller piece because where my company is, we're getting to that point as well. And so how did you decide that it was time? Obviously, there's bookkeeping and making sure that the money's coming in, and you've got property managers to make sure that you're collecting everything that's owed. Bookkeepers paying the bills. So that part I get, right? A controller is a different entity, right? Or a different role. And so let's talk to you about 2 things. One is, what does that controller do for you? And how did you decide you were ready for that person?
So I think it goes back to that book I told you about, Buy Back Your Time, right?
Yeah.
I pretty much eliminated most of my day-to-day, most of the responsibilities that require day-to-day input, like tenant management, tenant communications, things like that. The things that I'm working on now are getting deals under contract, writing offers, putting loan request packages together for a bank so we can get multiple term sheets, putting appraisal packages together, putting investor packages together. Speaking, it's like things that I'm working on are very much tasks that that we want this person to focus on, right? So we want this person to help create materials for investors, for lenders, for appraisers to ensure the business plan moves according to plan. We also want this person to track our global debt service coverage ratio across our portfolio, because a lot of these are commercial loans, and we're required to have at least, for most of them, a 1.2 debt service coverage ratio, right? Manage our reconciliation, right? Like we self-manage, but 175 doors. So there's a lot of billbacks associated with that. PM billbacks, maintenance tax billbacks. People get bonuses for getting units listed, right? There's a lot of sort of billbacks that we have to ensure are done correctly, as well as just keeping a close eye on our profit and loss statements and our balance sheets across our portfolio, because we own upwards of 25, 30 LLCs with multiple properties under them. It's a lot to manage. And we need multiple eyes on that to really make sure that everything's going in accordance with how we want our portfolio to be managed.
Okay. All right. Wow. That's really impressive. And you do something similar. You alluded to it earlier that we do here. And that is, I call it what's stressing it out. The things that either I don't like doing, I'm not good at, or stuff that is just stressing somebody on the team out. First thing we do is look at it and say, okay, well, can we automate it? Can we outsource it? Can we delegate it to someone else? Meaning that we need to hire somebody. And we go through that process on a quarterly basis. And slowly but surely, we get to document all of our systems, create and document our systems, but also it's one of the guiding forces behind, okay, at what point does it make sense to invest in technology? At what point does it make sense to bring somebody else on? And we're a heavy user of virtual assistants as well. In fact, we have an agency here for other real estate investors as well. But it's interesting that the process you go through time and time again, as I interview executives like yourself, it's interesting how many of them understand that this is a team game, and you can use technology as a force multiplier, but you still need human beings to keep the trains running on time. And being very clear and deliberate about their roles is a path to success. And honestly, man, I couldn't agree more with the premise of your initial premise, which around W-2 life is a good life, right? If not everybody is made out to be an entrepreneur. Doesn't make you less or more. It just is, right? And being an entrepreneur is hard, and having people working for you is difficult as well, right? It's a lot of stress. You got payroll to make, a lot of moving parts that, you don't own them, but day to day, but you control them, you manage them. And so the fact that you've taken such a thoughtful approach to your business is really impressive. So I'm curious about a controller, in my mind, one of the things that they own are operational and financial key performance indicators, KPIs.
Correct.
And so I'm curious about the KPIs that you pay attention to in your business. For instance, I heard you say that you track very closely your debt service coverage ratio, which is really smart. But I'm also curious about the health of your portfolio itself. What are some of the things that you pay attention to from an operating perspective that tell you, yep, this building's going the right way, or hey, we've got to make some changes because it's going sideways on us, right?
Yeah, all really good questions. And that's going to be another role of this controller, is to keep track of the KPIs that have a ready, viewable dashboard, right? But when it comes to tracking KPIs, it all comes down to watching the revenue. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Watching your expenses. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? How much money is coming into your business? How much money are you pushing out of your business? It all comes down to those, right? So to your point, what are some things that we would like to keep track of? Like your global debt service coverage ratio or the trending debt service coverage ratio, right? So if a property is trending upwards or trending stable and it's above 1.2, that's not concerning to me. But if I see a property's debt service coverage ratio trending downward, that's concerning to me. Or cash is king, right? So we like to have all of our projects have at least 6-month pity in the operating account, right? That's another indicator that would be concerning to me if we had low balances across our portfolio, right? Vacancy, right? How quickly do we get units rented? Like on average, we get 8 to 10 vacancies a month, right? If we're not renting 8 units every month, what happens? Those vacancies build up until we're going to get an insurmountable amount of vacancies and our business is going to be in trouble, right? So filling those vacancies quickly with good tenants is very important to keep the business moving forward, right? So those are some indicators that we like to keep track of with our business.
So 6 months pity. So pity is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. So for those of us out there keeping track of acronyms, that's what Andrew meant. And so 6 months, that's really interesting. So have you always carried 6 months, or is that a new revelation? Like we didn't, and the reason I ask is we used to carry 3 and then COVID happened. And we did the exact same thing that you do now, which is we extended everything to 6 months.
Yeah. To your point, that's the goal, right?
Mhm.
When you're doing value add
Sure.
multi, that might not be there initially. The goal is to
Right.
get there. But you want at least 6 months pity because it's like, what if a unit turn? What if your heating unit goes? If you have 3 months, you're going to have to fill the account up. We've investors in these deals. We can't be asking them for money. We got to make sure that these properties self-sustain themselves. And even at times, me and my partner will throw in money in the operating account just in the short term, just to keep it moving forward, to make sure the business plan comes to fruition. So I think 6 months is imperative, especially when you're buying kind of B, C class properties, which we're buying that are on the older side. Maybe you're talking new construction. Maybe it's a different equation that you utilize.
Yeah, no, in all candor, there were times where we were putting in money as well, just to keep it moving. And I got tired of doing that. And then COVID came along and we thought, you know what, because we flip houses as well. As we flip houses, we're not going to take that capital. We're going to put that back into the business and use that to create a better reserve, a 6-month reserve. So that's what we did. But yeah, it's really interesting. I want to talk with you about other people's money, and then I want to get into the final 5. So other people's money. How do you raise money these days? How did you start, and how do you raise today?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A motivated seller just filled out your web form. If you call back within 5 minutes, you're nearly 4 times more likely to get that seller appointment. But delay your follow-up by even just 10 minutes? Forget it. You're toast. Ella Vista Connect calls that lead back in 60 seconds, qualifies them, and schedules your meeting. Find out how much slow follow-up is costing you. Free calculator at ellavista.com/underground.
So the way I started was I thankfully got on the Bigger Pockets podcast, the Rookie podcast, a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
And thankfully my podcast was pretty successful. So right after that podcast happened, somebody who I was at a mastermind with, a local real estate mastermind, brought me a 69-unit portfolio in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It was a great deal. We get it for about $80,000 a door, when doors in New Bedford, Massachusetts trade between $100,000 and $120,000. It made sense all day. The only problem was this guy didn't have the money to close it. But he saw me in the Bigger Pockets podcast. I was building a reputation as a known multifamily investor. And when he thought of who can raise the capital for that deal, he thought of me. So that's when he contacted me to raise money for the deal. Me and my partner, Zach. That was 2021. No, So August 2022 is when we closed. So it was about March, May 2022 is when we started raising capital from investors. So that was our first capital raise. We had to raise about $1.8 million. We went about that in very manual way. Like the manual way we did it was I just made a list of 300 people that I thought might consider investing. And every single day I reached out to three people for a couple months. And that's how I went about doing it. And we raised about $1.1 million. We came a little bit short. So at that point, that's why it's really important to have mentors in your life, because my mentor was a syndicator. My mentor owns 500 units. So at that point, we were running into issues. What did I do? I simply called my mentor and he raised the remainder, right? Obviously, we had to give equity away for that, but I'd rather have something than 100% of nothing. And that
Absolutely.
But that deal allowed the floodgates for us to start raising money for more deals. So at that point, we just started getting deals under contract. We got the formula down, created a CRM, did a monthly newsletter where we provide value to people, started speaking at meetups, started just trying to provide value, not trying to sell anybody anything, just simply trying to provide value. And then when good deals happen, we simply send it out to our network on our CRM, and things were funded pretty easily.
Excellent. Yeah, it's amazing how when create those relationships and you're smart enough to nurture them, and you and I agree on how to do it as well. I think that if you you educate enough people, if you help them understand how you got to where you got, some of them will take that information and go, okay, I'm going to go do this myself. Awesome. That's great. But a lot of them will say, you know what? That sounds like a lot. And I want to play, I want to participate, but I want to work with somebody who knows how to do this inside and out rather than do it on my own. And that's where someone like you or another investor who's raising money, that is a valuable resource in their world, right? So that's fantastic. Okay. So let's get to the final 5, and we're going to start to land this plane, so to speak. So I'm always curious about motivation and what gets you out of bed on Monday morning. So finish the sentence for me. My purpose is
to provide value to the world.
very simple and very profound. I love that. And obviously you've been doing this for a while and you've been doing it very successfully. We've all had mentors, and I'm curious about the folks who have affected you and given you advice. What's the best advice you ever got, and who gave it to you?
I think this just goes back to providing value. In this world, the more value you provide, the more the world will provide back. And it's really important when providing value, expect nothing in return. Because if you have that expectation, that makes it very much a transactional type of situation when you want a relationship, right? Going back to that point, that was the best advice I've absolutely heard. And it's completely served me time and time again. I'll just give you a quick example. When I found my mentor was hosting meetups all over Massachusetts, but he wanted to open up a meetup in Worcester, one of the second largest city in Mass. He had a virtual meetup. He was asking, does anybody have any ideas for venues? There were literally 50 people on the call. That weekend, I literally went to 5 different places, got pricing, got videos, got the manager's information. I put in a nice, sexy Google Drive, sent it right over to him. And he's like, wow, I've been asking for this for 8 months. Nobody did this. Do you want to be my first guest speaker? I was like, absolutely. I'd love to.
Yeah.
And then from there, I actually ended up hosting a meetup under his brand. I brought him value in the form of bringing up his brand. And then I became an investor focused agent, brought him value in the form of commissions, right?
Yeah.
Started partnering with deals. I partnered with him in a couple of deals. I just went out of my way to provide this guy value, expecting nothing in return. But at a certain point, when you bring in somebody tens, hundreds of $1,000s in commissions, like, this guy's obviously going to pick up my phone call if I have questions. Wouldn't you? If I brought you $100,000, wouldn't you be picking up my call all the time? I would.
Heck yeah. I would.
Right? So it's just a simple concept of reciprocity that I think a lot of people don't really take into account when it comes to finding a mentor or just seeking help in general.
It's a really important point you just made, in that people like you and people like your mentor are really busy. And would your mentor like to help everybody? Yeah. We would, but there's a finite amount of time, and we have a business to run, and we have families and lives, and we do carve out time to help people, but that can't be the job. And so one of the ways that really successful people figure out, okay, who am I going to help, are the ones who are law of reciprocity, as you said. It's a real thing, right? And the folks that are bringing me value are the first phone calls I return, either in the morning or at the end of the day. Right. It's an easy pecking order, and I'm going to try and get to everybody, but most days I don't. But I start with the folks that bring me value every day. Right.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I'm also curious about, I personally think that mistakes are a good thing, and that you learn your most important lessons from mistakes, not from successes. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about a mistake you made. What was one of the bigger mistakes you've ever made, and how did you recover?
The biggest mistake I've made, I would say, is not acting on my dreams sooner. Like, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to go after my dreams. At the end of the day, I was simply scared. I was simply scared of the repercussions and was scared of taking the leap. And the thing that really, my biggest mistake was waiting 10 years when I'm in the workforce to actually go after my dreams. So I guess to your point, what was my biggest mistake? Waiting and not taking action.
Yeah. And it's a common refrain, right? It's so many people come at this, myself included. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in 2008. It fundamentally changed my worldview, and it took me 3 years to pull the trigger on my first deal. And it had everything to do with fear.
Yep.
And so it's interesting, and it's a very common issue we're human, right? We crave certainty, and the unknown scares the living crap out of most of us.
Yeah. It's funny because the more successful people I run across, the more I realize how much inner demons they conquer before they sought their success, right? Because 100%. For you to really go in the unknown, you really have to look in the mirror and be comfortable and with yourself as well as your past, right?
Right.
I see so many people living their past self, and that's holding their future self back.
100%. Okay. So readers almost universally leaders tend to be readers, right? And so I'm curious about how you take in information, whether that's through books, either physical or virtual, or conferences or podcasts. How do you take in information? And also, who are you paying attention to these days? We already talked about Dan Martell, but who else?
How do I take in information? All the above. I'm part of masterminds. I'm part of GoBundance, which is
Sure.
mastermind. I host local real estate meetups. I go to meetups. I learn. I make connections through those. Listen to podcasts nonstop. I love Mark Zuba, One Renter at a Time. Really good economics insight. I love Ken McElroy. Listen to Ken McElroy.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, obviously, Brandon Turner is always dear to my heart. Helped me get started in this game. Right. So those are some sources that I listen to. And then books. I'm a voracious reader for sure. I like to buy back your time, but I'm very much in a lot of personal development as well. Okay. So it could be 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. Really good book. Even things that are not business related, like The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. It's the deep look inside yourself. Or Think Like a Monk. I think that's Jay Shetty, which kind of, it makes you think, how am I taking information and how am I reacting to the world, right? Yeah, those are some sources that kind of drive me forward.
Excellent. Final question then is about success. Finish the sentence for me. Success means what to you?
Success means that more people like me and want to work with me. At the end of the day, your success is directly correlated to how many people like you and want to work with you. Say, for example, if Elon Musk wanted to work with me, there's a good reason I'd be a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire. So it's really important to cultivate those relationships, but also have a very high level of integrity and ethics where somebody does want to work with you day in and day out, even during the ups, but also the downs, and know that you will do your best to push this ball forward and to get it right.
Right on. Awesome. All right, Andrew. Hey, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You have built a really impressive business, and it has everything to do with your hard work and your character. Congratulations. So when you're not talking about real estate or buying properties, what do you like to do for fun?
Oh, man. So for the first 3 years of my endeavor, I was and I still am, workaholic. That resulted in me never traveling, just had my head down, grinding. But now I really enjoy traveling. So this year alone, I've been to Miami, I've been to Italy, I've been to Portland. Where else did I go? I went to Mexico, Cancun. So I absolutely love traveling. Being out in nature, I think you're getting the goods in the woods, going hiking. I love that. I do enjoy some yoga. I absolutely just love personal development, trying to be the best version of myself every single day. And that might be me doing the miracle morning. That could be me reading. That could be me going to conferences. That can be me participating in masterminds. But I absolutely love just growing into a new version of myself every single day.
Excellent. Excellent. And so as an observer, you're killing it. So congratulations. So Andrew, if somebody wants to learn more about you or your business, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
They can simply follow me on social at Investor Freed on Instagram or Andrew Freed on LinkedIn and Facebook. And I am very active. I put out free educational content. I think I have over 150 tips on how to invest. So definitely check me out. I always try to provide as much value as possible.
Awesome. Andrew Freed, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really good to see you and continued good fortune.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate you having me.
This has been the Real Estate Underground. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, Undergrounders, remember your real estate journey begins with a simple step forward. Now get to it. Bye for now.